Welcome back to Smarter You Media. Crazy as we are, we guarantee to make you smarter in 2 minutes. Guaranteed. We are super lucky today to have Jared Harrell with us. He runs the Center for Real Estate at the Rawls College of Business and is a man of many talents, has been in the real estate market. He's an attorney. He's smarter than the rest of us, so he's going to help us get a little better. Jared, welcome to Smarter You Media.
Appreciate it. Glad to be here, Steve. Man, I've been looking forward to this. Thanks for the invite.
Well, we don't mess around. We get straight to it. Nobody has to wait for us to go through long winded things. You're going to straight up give us something that makes us smarter in 2 minutes. So, we need to name the chicken timer, don't we? We'll work on that. We'll work on that before the next episode. But the chicken timer is going to get set with 2 minutes. That's one. That's two. And so, Jared Harrell, make us just a little bit smarter.
Sure, appreciate it. I love the ability to get straight to the point. And so I think a big misunderstanding that permeates a lot of the public is that when they hear real estate, they immediately think houses. Okay, but commercial real estate functions way differently. Things like office buildings, strip centers, industrial warehouses, apartments, because so people don't interact with it daily. They have a misunderstanding of really how it creates value. And so I think there's three distinct ways that commercial real estate is different in how we think of value. In residential real estate, you always hear location, 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 right? Commercial real estate is about cash flows. It's about cash flows to the bottom line, and that really drives its value and its investment potential. Two is not a passive investment. It's a business. A lot,
So true.
a lot of the cash flows and how they're generated don't come from just buying it. You have to operate it. You have to maximize that. So it's things like property management, asset management, really driving those rents and why people pay for that. It's a business. You don't just sit back and do nothing. And then third, kind of the risk profile of commercial real estate is way different than most people think of houses, right? Houses, because they're primarily locationally based, they're going to appreciate over time due to where it sits on this globe. Commercial real estate is different than that. It drives its value from how it's being productively used. And I think all of this is kind of summed up by the concept of industrial real estate the past couple of years. It's exponential, not exponential, but rapid increase in value due to the pandemic and how we distribute goods, way different than how houses have reacted. So I'm done.
Wow. I mean, you hit it directly on the mark. Nobody does that. I'm telling you. I love that you start us off there. So, honestly, we're going to let anybody go who wants to go. So, you have a gem to take with you that you can stare at for the rest of the day. But we have a lot more to talk about because we've just planted a seed that we plan to grow an oak from. So, let's start right back where you began because the concept of real estate generally is wrapped up in what we talk about as the American dream or the dream of home ownership and the like. So it is an aspirational thing that is very much baked into our society. And truly, when we think of real estate, I think that is where most of our minds go. Um, Explain to me, give me a description of some of the different kinds of commercial real estate. So not a home, not something I'm buying to live with my family. What are we talking about when you say commercial real estate? Just give me examples.
Sure. And so most people describe them as food groups. And so the big four in commercial real estate are retail. So that's your strip centers, your malls, your industrial, right, which is both warehouses and active production facilities. Third, the classic office, right? That's the office tower where you go to work. And then fourth is multifamily real estate. And kind of the distinction there is, are you owning it as an investment or are you owning it to live in? If you're owning it to live in, that's a different category, right? That's residential real estate. A growing, and probably in the next 5 years, there's going to be a fifth food group that everybody says. Right now, they kind of classify it as other, which
Oh,
includes a
okay.
lot. But this concept of data centers is really, I think, going to drive a more refined kind of fifth category.
So you think that will find its way into being an entirely different category because it's so predominant as AI and all of its cousins start using so much energy and data centers. We just have to have all of that, right?
Right, and how it functions and the understanding of it is so different. Right now, it's kind of lumped in industrial,
Yeah.
but it's not truly a warehouse or a production facility. It's a different type of use. It requires a different understanding of things like electric power delivery, and to adapt that from an electrical standpoint, what it takes to drive some of these servers. Also, you bring in cryptocurrency in that. It's a different mindset, and I think it really drives the need for maybe a fifth category.
That makes an awful lot of sense. You talked about passive, non-passive investments, and I talk all the time with people talking about passive investments, and there are very few of them. I mean, if you are doing something like real estate, there is no real passive investment. And if you are fortunate enough to be able to invest, you can be at a 401k, you can have something that helps you grow for your retirement. But we would all be better served if we're fortunate enough to be able to invest, to be paying more attention and be more proactive.
Absolutely. And I think when you use the term passive, I mean, there's kind of two ways I think about it from a passive standpoint. I think number one, I can be a passive investor that just sits back and collects mailbox money. That's awesome. But guess what? Somebody is out there actively managing that investment. And if you're not doing anything, you're paying for it. Right. And so when you're thinking about the full spectrum risk return of real estate, I think you have to understand, although your check may not be active in what you do, its productivity and its value is derived a lot of how it's actively operated.
Well, you have lived a broad and big life. On your bio, it talks about studying at Oxford. How is your English accent?
It's terrible. Actually, my East Texas accent completely dominates it. But my wife actually got pretty good.
Oh, good.
She taught in basically a kindergarten there, and so she was around the children all day. And she had some fantastic stories of that she can use a British accent pretty well.
Well, I think you cross over into having a perspective that's different every time you go and live in a different place. So, did you feel like the world of East Texas combined to finding its way into the Oxford community? You came back never seeing your world the same again?
Absolutely. The experience to just experience a different, really educational system and how, number one, Oxford is very unique. It's actually very similar to Harry Potter, believe it or not, in how
It
it's a
looks like
house
it.
and a college type system. So
Yeah,
seeing
yeah, it
that,
looks like it.
but then also in the context and the history of that institution that's been around, I mean, since like, I want to say, I don't remember, it's around, 1,000 AD when it was founded, way before America was even a concept, right? Um, and yes, that was probably the biggest impact to me of just spending time at that institution, but then also the broader living in a different society, a different culture, because we were only there a year, and so it was longer than a vacation, but it wasn't permanent, right? We knew we were coming
Right.
back, so.
Good. So we got absolutely no attempt to show us your British accent. I see how you just avoided that one
Yeah,
entirely.
well, okay, so I'll give you the one. So my wife always gets mad at me
All right.
because it's a common greeting, or at least it's a little bit old, was "Hello, governor" or "Hello, governor."
Hello,
And
Governor.
so every morning I would greet her with that, and she got quite annoyed at it because she just said it wasn't funny.
Well, I think over time the repeated beat in comedy is if you say it enough, it becomes funny. So keep trying.
Especially
Maybe,
if your
maybe
wife gets
someday.
mad about it, then it's even
Ah,
funnier,
that's
right?
those are great times. That's absolutely right. Well, I do think the perspective is a great thing to have as you come back to the world that you came from, and you bring that experience with you. You and I share a deep dark secret in both of our lives, which is we're both recovering attorneys. So not practicing law anymore is one of those things, but it's an incredible education, right? I feel like it is helpful in so many ways. Uh, how has that participated in your experience as you've moved from the practice of law into teaching and running a center?
Yeah, it was unique, I think, because I had a combination of the legal education and then the background. And then there, when I did a master's, it was really focused around transactional type economics. And I had had a baseline introduction to economics, and I'm by no means an economist, but just really thinking about and driving home the concept of incentives. And then I came back and practiced law, and it was hugely, I think, it helped me grow my level of advising because then I started to understand about these deal structures and transaction structures. And you went from just putting words on a page to saying, wow, I can really, by how you set up incentives in the deal, it can, you can actually create value and these parties can work together better. That was really the big thing I took away from that kind of master's education, then practicing law. And then I try and bring it into the classroom when we're talking about real estate and the deals, and really get the students to see the incentives and how these things are structured and maybe why people do what they do, or potentially you might be able to think about the future and how they might act, right? If properly structured.
Well, it's a big deal. When I mean that, deals are a big deal. It's one of those things we all do in life, and we can all learn every day to do it better. And it's profound in how it affects us. So, some of the things that I'm sure you talk to with your students, and that you work with people all across the land of Texas and beyond, that you haunt, and I mean that in only the best possible ways. You always can find creative ways to make a deal, and you. It seems like one of those places that we abdicate in our lives so many times. It's sort of, all right, we've made it to this point, we're ready to make a deal, and then we hand something to the attorneys. Oftentimes, that's where it dies. So being able to be a deal maker, not a deal killer, is one of those things that I've worked really hard to find when we hire attorneys internally and externally. How have you found that translates into all of the various areas that you've worked?
Yeah, it's been helpful. I always, and thankfully, I had some really great mentors when I first started practicing law. When I really knew nothing out of law school, I worked with a fantastic, I think one of the best all-around attorneys, and he really taught me a lot. And kind of one of the big things I took away was, look, it's a service, right? And people pay you for a service because they want to accomplish something, and so help them accomplish it. Don't be the no guy that kills it, right? They're coming to you for advice. Now, you also have to help them manage risk, and sometimes that means saying no, but most of the time, they want you to make sure it happens. That's why they're hiring you. So I always carried that forward, and then I think you then roll that in with the ability to create value. So many times I got frustrated by attorneys because they would draw the line and say, "Well, I don't want to help you with that because that's business advice, and I'm a lawyer and I only provide legal advice." In my mind, there's no difference between the two. Um, there's nothing that says a lawyer can't give you business advice. So I always took that perspective of, how do we get to yes? How can we structure this? And probably the best way to do that is look at the incentives. What do people want? How do we get those aligned as much as possible to get to this place we're going or we want to go?
How do you find the world when we now have deals that we sign every day when we sign on that we know that we don't read? So the world we live in is not the world you and I grew up in. It's a different place because we just sort of go, yeah, okay, whatever, and we pay no attention.
I know. I mean, just think about all of the license agreements we agreed to. I mean, I just downloaded Chrome to prep for here, and there's no telling how many arbitration provisions I agreed to where I got to take myself to Probably
Yeah.
Palo Alto, California, if I have an issue with my web browser, right? I do, I mean, I do, I don't like that. I think we are it does not allow us to make the best informed decisions, and we're placing trust maybe in places, but we should just think about it a little harder. And so, yes, I agree. I'm with you there. And I hope we as a society, a consumer base, eventually, or at least stay informed enough to know where to draw the line on those types of agreements that we enter every day of our lives.
I mean, quite literally, if you were to not like something, there's no one you can call. It's a binary, the binary decision. It's very, that's and we literally we exist in that a place all the time. And maybe when I was renting a car before, this is just a part and parcel of where we already were. But it seems like it's ubiquitous everywhere all the time to me.
Yeah, I agree. And even as a practicing attorney, sometimes I got those types of agreements where a client would send it to me, and I'm like, dude, like Chevrolet is not going to change this term for you.
Yeah, you'll
I
you'll
can I
buy.
can propose a red line and send it back, but you ain't getting anywhere with it. So don't waste your money, right? On paying
uh,
me.
don't waste that time. Creative deals. So first of all, I know that we don't have to be on any track at all, right? So it's great. The Smarter You Media notion is that the whole idea of life is that we should be on a journey of educating ourselves every day. Right. So I love that we have found our way back into sort of the crossroads of deal making and real estate and how that works. Any particular things you can think of as sort of creative deal solutions? Because I feel like in rooms so often that's what's needed. And sometimes people aren't thinking that all a deal is an expression of what you want to do. Any
Right.
examples that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you a classic one and then maybe a newer version of that. And so, real estate at its core, it stole the Silicon Valley kind of venture capital type model where you split your capital sources or your investors into two buckets, kind of your active GP and your passive LP. And then they created this kind of preferred return type model. And really, what it does is it incentivizes the parties to get to a point of a certain return. And as a reward for that, your active party who took a major of the risk, they're going to push their returns to the back end in more of a growth type mindset. And so I love the real estate joint venture model because it does allow me to hammer home those things like incentives. And you see why you set these targets and these returns, and it pushes some parties to work this way and this way. But if we keep our eye on the prize, we can all make money on this deal. And there's constantly creative takes on that. And so, for example, I was previously I was looking at a deal this morning, and somebody was proposing they were very asset rich company, had a lot of things on their balance sheet, but they just needed an infusion of capital. And they were offering kind of a mezzanine type strip of just it's like preferred type equity. You sit at the top of the equity capital stack, but you just get like a debt type return of interest. And they were kind of floating that around just to solve their short-term cash flow needs. But at the same time, there's investors out there who say, hey, that's a really good deal because it's a lot more than the 5% I'm going to get in the money market account. And so it helps me. And so, yeah, I think you're seeing more and more of those, especially as real estate's been stressed over the past couple of years. Interest rates have kind of accelerated, and they've caught some borrowers in a bad position. And so you're kind of seeing they still have good assets, but you just have to get a little more creative than the traditional bank loan to meet your kind of capital needs.
And I would translate as best I can what you just said in a very simple sort of phrase, which just is there's nothing you can't do and put into a deal if people agree with it. and it works for all sides. And that is how simple it is. Yet I have been in rooms where I've watched attorneys tell both sides that it just doesn't look like we can get past this point. And that is true sometimes, but it should always be driven by the business points and what you're trying to accomplish.
I probably, in 12 years of actively practicing law, I mean, I probably had two occasions where that happened, to where it was like, all right, this is a deal breaker. We're walking away. Most of the time, there's always a give and take where, okay, if you want this, what am I getting in return, right? I mean, as long as both parties walk into the room kind of recognizing that, you almost always got the deal done.
Yeah. And examples of things that were from my world when we first started the World Poker Tour, right? So at a time when poker was something played by 20 million people in their homes across the country, but no one had ever branded it. No one had ever gone to the big casinos and said, hey, we'd like to film your tournament and make it into a sport. We struck out after raising money to go and try to make those deals with the casinos. But we had an understanding of what was going to be. So actually planning for the future and success was and is always critical. So we knew that right now there were things they would perceive as not having value because today they didn't have value. On the other hand, if this worked, like we had the crazy dream that it would work, then things like these rights to film their tournaments would have value. So when we approached them, our deal with them was we'll make this the best marketing venture ever in the casino, no matter what. We're going to put you on television. You'll get all kinds of exposure for a very small amount of money. But all we ask is that you don't then go give that away to someone else once we give it value. And so we had literally a 10-year unilateral exclusive agreement with the biggest casinos in the world. And they perceived that there was no value there. So they thought this is just all good. There was nothing that they would think would be a negative. That led to this sort of deal that some were frustrated a little bit later in some ways, and we made some accommodations. But that plan for the future thing to me and plan for success is a big part of what it should be when you're a deal maker.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean that future value, and where we're going, and even on the flip side, it's like, well, what am I valuing that out? How far is it in the future? What's it going to mean to me? What do I have to give up to get it? And ultimately, you're striking that balance, and all right, yeah, this works. So.
Well, now that we've spent a lot of time talking about commercial real estate, I'm going to go back to what we all think of as real estate, which is, getting a home, buying a home, doing those sorts of things. You talked about the outside pressures that have an effect on that, things that you do and don't control. So in all of the learning that you've had over this time for real estate, the law in real estate, what's the sort of best primer you could give to somebody who's looking at the decision? Do I buy a home? Do I not buy a home? I can think today, but honestly, anytime.
Right. I would say, many people have a misunderstanding of the appreciation and value of any type of real estate. And if you look over the long term, just the straight value appreciation of real estate is like 3% a year. It's not huge, right? Now, we magnify that because we borrow up to 90% of that capital at historically low interest rates. And so you lever, but that's a risky move, right? The underlying true asset growth value is only like 3%. And so I think people misunderstand that, and kind of the effect of how a mortgage adds risk, but also adds return to that. And so, that's kind of what I've learned. And so 3% is not real attractive. And so that really puts the pressure on back to location of residential real estate. And, those people that have made huge returns on either their own home or even subdivision builders, et cetera, it's because they nailed the location right.
and get it right and get it lucky.
Yeah, and sometimes there's no predictable pattern of that at all. And so I if you're somebody out holding yourself as a locational expert, that's a pretty high bar to meet because a lot of it is a little bit random.
Yeah, well, that's where I get as a poker guy. I mean, the we undervalue the role that luck, good fortune, things out of our control play all the time. But I think
Without a
it's
doubt.
important to talk. We tend to talk to people in their successful mode. So the person who was Nostradamus at the end, and you say, "Oh my gosh, how did you know?" Well, we know that there were thousands of people prognosticating things that never came true. We just don't know their names.
Absolutely. Because yeah, those guys that got the two on the river, right? Sorry, it's just random distribution. It happens,
The expression in poker is that's poker. I mean,
right?
you can have done everything right and get there, but I believe that's universal in all human endeavors. And there are times that I've experienced and our business experienced things that were completely outside of our control because there was an election going on in France. The event that we had done for 5 years in Paris was not going to happen just because Sarkozy, the guy running, had been mayor, and he just didn't want anything to have any questions. Perfectly legal. It had been in a legal establishment forever. And because of that, we couldn't do it for a year. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so the typical underwriting valuation process of real estate, usually it's you look at a 10-year cash flow, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer, but 10 is kind of the base case. And what I tell my students is if you think that you can predict anything happening in 10 years, well, you're absolutely lying. That's impossible. And so we do the best we can, but if we're going to think we can predict the future, well, then we have a fundamental miss on that might be a deal point that we can never agree on.
Well, I was going to say, though, if you could do that, this would be a very popular podcast episode.
Well, that person would probably be so rich. I don't know if you could get him on, Steve. So.
Well, I'm talking about you. I thought you were going to predict the future for us right now. Come on, Jared. Now's the time, man. And maybe
Right.
not.
No, I can't get through my day right, much less the future.
Well, you are engaged, you run the Center for Real Estate at the Rawls College of Business. I believe centers are a relatively recent phenomenon and are a fascinating place that are somewhere at the intersection of what I would consider to be commercial, academia, and probably community. So, tell me things about how I think, is this 8 years, 9 years that you've been at the center, something like that?
Yeah, so I've been at Rawls for 10 years. I think we've technically had a center for like maybe six.
Okay.
Date's a little
Okay.
uncertain, but yeah.
Well, I got it completely wrong, but that's okay. I'm more than happy to get the thing wrong. But for 6 years, you've done that. So, what is the purpose? How does this function, and how do you make those various pieces and constituencies fit together in a way that are better, more efficient, and work in for everyone's betterment?
Sure. Yeah. And so I always try and drive home the point that we do four things. That's our real focus. It's our academic side where we offer the certificate in real estate to our students. It's our um, extracurricular engagement. So outside of the classroom, the stuff we offer the students through industry. Third, it's our professional engagement. So it's pulling the industry into that process. And then fourth, it's the academic research that universities are known for. And kind of the cohesive force that I try and thread throughout is the concept of uniquely practical, meaning that we're offering stuff that's helpful, right? It's not
Yeah.
abstract. You can take it home and you can do it. And we think we're unique in that not everybody does it. And so that's kind of what I've hung our hat on from the real estate perspective is we're driving home the everyday practical stuff. We're helping students learn how to do deals. We're providing them opportunities outside of the classroom to go and see them firsthand. We're bringing industry into that, and then we're going to provide a little bit of white paper type level research to the industry to maybe help educate them as well.
Uniquely practical. I like that. Did you see what happens when you stick around at Smarter You? You start out with 2 minutes, but then you find a beautiful little thing right there in the middle. That's pretty terrific. Can you give me an example of one of what I would consider to be verticals that exist like that? So each of those sort of programmatic things that you're doing, so that I would understand really how it functions.
Sure. And I'll give you an example of kind of one thing that is maybe hitting a lot of those. And so right now we have our real estate and banking case challenge going on at Rawls. And so what
Oh,
that is we give about this year there's 12 teams of 4 students, so 48 students in either the real estate or the banking program or class. They
hmm.
give them a case study, give them 3 weeks to do it. And so next Thursday, they will present to a panel of judges. And so that case study, it's a real life deal. It's actually the Estrada South Apartments in Lubbock.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Know them
They're
well.
act, they're
Sure.
actively they're actively listed for sale. And so the broker on the deal here in town is Grant Ream. And so he's helped kind of guide the students through that. We just went and did a site tour yesterday on the property. Each team is also paired with a local banking mentor from Citibank. And what they're doing
Yeah,
is
that's great.
advising those students on real time, like credit conditions, what type of loan could you get? What would the length of that loan be? Would it be a construction loan? Would it be a permanent loan? And then we'll have 4 industry judges on Thursday come and hear those presentations. And so
That's
it's
great.
it's something that Mike Malden and I over in the banking
Yeah,
program have done together. And so you see there, it's practical, it's everyday stuff. It's actually part of our classes in the classroom. Students are getting out of the normal, kind of as an extracurricular type. We're pairing them with industry. That's the type of stuff I want to focus on and do. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty good highlight of this kind of stuff we're trying to get done.
that sounds unique and practical. I love it. No, really, that sounds like the kind of thing that you would love to do. If it makes me want to go back to school, right? Because you're engaging in what we feel like we need, as opposed to once upon a time, the university, the world of academia was the place that you needed to go in order to get information. That's where it was. That's where the minds were, the thinking. And that is so not the case anymore. I mean, it's everywhere. I can find the greatest stores of all things and even have AI to guide me through the process and think for me if I want.
Right.
So to have practical sort of experiences that allow you to be marketable, right? I mean, that's part of it. This is so you can have a job and have a place to go. But beyond being marketable, you're also getting skills that when you get out there, you're ready to go. You're ready to
Right.
hit the pavement running, which is really exciting.
And Yeah, and one of the things this also allows us to do is we're trying to also build those soft skills. We're
Yeah.
housed in finance, and in the classroom we emphasize underwriting, analysis, etc. It's really hard to implement those soft skills like presentation skills, communication skills, team
Yeah.
building skills. But I've heard over and over again, this is what the industry want. They want both. They want the hard skills and the soft skills. It's difficult to do it in the traditional academic setting, but through this, the old model was look in the back of the chapter, it's got a case study, do it as homework. It's not a real deal. It's got static interest rates. This way, they're having to go out and do it and build those soft skills in the process. And so that's a component I really am excited to see grow. And it's given me a uniquely practical solution to
Look at that. See, we get
providing
right
that.
back to it. That's you. I really think that's a beautiful sort of innovation of how we teach because we all need to not just teach different better, but we need to learn different better, and that's where we are. So, like it or not, right? It's here. Forget it's coming. It's here. It's in our. It's on the device we're carrying around in our pocket.
I mean, personally, Steve, I think you and I are the savior of the university system. I mean, in today's age, when higher education is facing more and more scrutiny as to what we're providing, I think this is the model. And I think the Rawls College of Business has been an innovator and a leader in that for a couple years.
Yeah, I think there's no reason that we can't use the words Margaret Williams. I think the dean at Rawls is truly a visionary. So the fact that we're fortunate enough to work with her and to be in that umbrella where I think they're not just innovating, but they're taking chances and they don't always work. It's a
They
big deal.
are, and I'll give examples of two chances they took. They hired a poker guy and a lawyer to lead two of their centers. You know, I
talk,
mean,
talk about bad idea. Woo!
right, right.
Dang.
But I mean, I often tell the story, and I totally agree with you on Margaret Williams. Is that she just said, Jared, we'll give you the backing, make it happen. You're the real estate guy, not me. And so, she really gave me the runway to implement it, and I think it's paying off by getting industry folks like us who have maybe done these deals on the outside and can bring that more industry focused mindset within the umbrella of the university. So
I love that. And I love as you describe the program that's going on right now, it has people with people. And that is the thing, or one of the great gems that you can offer in a real people to people setting that you just don't get. I believe what we're doing, which is not we're doing this remotely, right? It's I believe this is amazing. I'm going to walk away feeling like I've had a terrific conversation and the like, but there is a need, there is a part of our very being that is fed by having those other experiences that's just different. It's different in quality and every measure you can imagine, I think.
I agree. And another component I've really tried to build a center on is that person to person need. In real estate, we call it your network, right?
Yeah.
What an easier way to create a network than to throw up a black and red double T and get a bunch of red raiders in the industry excited about it. And so that's been a huge part of our advancement, is just creating that network and a forum where those persons with real estate and Texas Tech interests can come together. And it's been hugely beneficial to us.
Well, since we've opened up the kimono, I'm going to then go directly into the AI world, which is the world is transforming at a pace that every time I worked with Alvin Toffler. I don't know if you know who he is. He wrote Future Shock and Beyond Future Shock and those sorts of things. So he was a futurist. He was someone who was looking to the future, and his one of the things he always used to say was never bet against technology, because if you do, you will have all, if you ever did, you would have always been wrong. And the other one was it will accelerate faster than you think. Al is dead, so he is not witnessing what's going on right now. But I don't think anyone had any notion of what AI would do to accelerate the pace and the disruption that surrounds us. What does that feel like, look like in its core in the real estate world? And I think law too. I think both of those disciplines are going to be very different in a few years.
I agree. And I think that it affects it in two ways. One is the real estate industry and really as a service provider, right? Brokers, analysts, appraisers. It's going to impact their day to day, but not too dissimilar from how it's impacting our day to day, right? How we use it,
Right.
how it makes us more productive, et cetera. I think the bigger conversation, and the conversation I don't think as many people are having, because most people tend to focus on the work side of it, is what it's doing to the commercial real estate as an asset, right? We're going to have to rethink the way we use, how AI is changing the way we use real estate. I mean, for example, I don't think there's a whole lot of people who would be excited about a landlord that says for the next 20 years, all I'm going to do is lease space to law firms and accounting firms, right? I mean, if we're not acknowledging that it's going to have impacts on that, the way those professions use space, right, and their needs for space, we're kidding ourselves. And then the other way is is then how do we need space to make that happen? And it's through this data center, right? And understanding how that whole industry works is going to be ultimately real estate's job, to be honest with you. They're going to put up the facilities that enable that to happen, and it's going to meet that demand. So it's going to have a huge seismic impact. I think most of the discussion right now is on day-to-day tasks and how we use it, but there's a whole nother conversation about the underlying space needs that we're going to have as a society.
Yeah, let's have the conversation. That's exciting to me. I mean, when you talk about it, it's sort of this is why I think I love the concept of Smarter You Media. It's sort of you just opened up a can and then I want to start eating some worms. So tell me what you mean. So I think I understand, and I'm sure I'm going to say it and it's going to be wrong, which is that the way that we traditionally have planned space is going to be made so much more efficient or potentially so much more efficient that everything from zoning laws to everything else is going to be impacted and we're going to have to figure it out. Is that anywhere close?
Yes, I mean, yes, I think that's a part of it. Also, how some real estate spaces get their value is really going to be impacted. For example, we've never really had to consider, combining huge power needs to power one of these AI, data centers. And also, we also need cooling at the same time because there's some very large machinery coming in.
Heat.
And so some spaces like West Texas, Phoenix, Northern Virginia have been unique combinations of that. And now all of a sudden that real estate is a whole lot more valuable if you can prove I can get you power and water to a facility. Well, guess what? You can put a data center up and you can fill that sucker as fast as you can build it right now.
Yeah. So literally, I was completely wrong in almost every
No,
way. No, no. I
no,
mean, I was talking about something different. But the thing
no.
you're talking, yeah, go ahead. Tell me
Yeah,
how I'm
but
right,
how we
please.
facilitate, trickle down from that, how we facilitate that. All right, now we've got to zone, regulate, provide
Yeah.
power, provide transportation,
Yeah.
provide access to spaces that we never perceived, right? And so it's going to be a big shift all the way down the value chain and how that happens. And so, yes, I think you hit a point of it about zoning, but then I think it goes all the way down to like the dirt itself and its value and how
Yeah.
we use it.
And again, I'm going to try to repeat back to you what I heard, so you can correct me where I didn't get it right. But the what I think I heard is again, when I'm thinking more about AI and the things it accomplishes within the industry. What you're seeing, because it's such a predominant part of the impact this is going to have on real estate, is simply what is going to be required in order to be the oxygen for AI.
Right. And so a very simplistic explanation of that, we're going to need less office and more industrial, right? Because we're going to have fewer, honestly, workers, right? Because we're going to automate a lot of tasks. And so they're not going to commute to the traditional office, but we're going to need to power all that stuff with huge facilities. So that's just the kind of the easy shift you'll see in how real estate operates. But then when you start trickling down of why that happens, it's a I think a bigger question.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of the actual tool itself being something that someone who is a in the real estate market, they're going to get smarter, better, faster at making that more efficient for their business. And that itself will have space implications because you mentioned to law firms and accounting firms that is the space they're renting to. You may mean that because that's all that's left. Is that part of what you mean?
Right.
Yes,
But
I didn't get it. Okay.
uh, yes, you nailed it.
Yeah, but I
But
didn't
there's
get
so
it.
much unknown about it too. For example, during the COVID pandemic, retail apocalypse, right? Shopping centers are dead. Nobody's ever going to go to a store again. Well, guess what? One of the best performing asset classes over the past year in real estate was is retail. Shoppers have been resilient. That we didn't get it right the way we predicted the apocalypse. So there's a lot of stuff to think through on how what those future impacts are going to be, how we're going to feel them, when we're going to feel them. But it's coming. It's going to change. It's coming without a doubt.
So then on the other side of that, because you keep opening up cans, you got to be careful. We could be here for days, Jared. I feel like our conversation will never end. But I really do then want to get into the transformation that's coming and what that means, because we're in education, right? We care about people coming out, getting educated, going and having jobs. The market itself is being, I shouldn't even say it is yet, because I feel like it's hardly even begun. But the kinds of things that I can do with the deep research AI on OpenAI is remarkably helpful and makes me more efficient, but it also makes me not need to hire graduate students in the way that I otherwise would need to. That's an impact. What do you see in real estate if I'm someone who is in one of your classes, or I'm heading into college or graduate school, and I love real estate, something I want to do. How do I get smart? How do I do that in such a way that I can be prepared and be better uh, adapted for the changes that are coming?
I think the best hedge that you can take against any type of technological innovation is being able to think, right? That's the one thing I hear over and over from employees or employers is I want students who can critically think. And I don't think that job function will ever be taken away. So yes, there will be, I think, net job losses due to it, but I think the students that we're preparing and are focusing on that can think, and that then can take this technology and use it to their advantage, right? Because their competitors are, and so to keep up, you got to learn it. Um, I, I think that's a little bit more of the focus that I think I'm trying to take is critical thinking matters, and using technology like the industry uses it, so you're not seen as a liability, is becoming more and more important from that aspect.
All right. So what's the secret? What's the little thing that nobody's thinking about that in your mind you sort of see out there and you feel like we're missing the mark? You feel like we're not paying attention to it, but there's something coming. There's gold in them there hills. What's the thing in your mind that would be a little something that you would say, hey, keep your eye on this. No guarantees, right? This is not a guarantee, but this thing's coming and I think it's going to be exciting.
I think you're going to see a roaring comeback of the traditional office space. I honestly do. The word I'm hearing from not only like the major employers, but even the banks, the commercial real estate firms that I talk to, I'm not seeing massive downsizing, at least in the positions you and I are placing. Those people are there, and to make a mark, you got to be in the office because it's that person to person contact that will never be replicated. It's the water cooler talk. It's the, hey, let me bounce this off of you. Yeah, you can do it virtually,
Yeah.
without a doubt. We have the ability to seamlessly do that. I don't know if that will ever replace the, hey, let me show you this deal real quick on your desk and let's talk about it with a cup of coffee. And so Office has been struggling. It's been trying to figure out how society is going to use the office space. I think a lot of what we are going to end up doing is going to look a lot like 2018, to be honest with you.
That is something I echo and agree. I think we may want to silo ourselves and find ourselves wandering around in a landscape in the meta. We may think that's what it is. I think we will wander back to each other because it is for millions of years how we've been wired. I mean, it's just different. And I'm going to tell you, as somebody who has run public and private companies, there's the stuff that we don't even understand in between the stuff that we think we do that is what works. And I think what you're talking about is that stuff. One of my favorite books these days is a book called Stillness is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And the basic premise is to go to the people we admire for the remarkable decisions that they made in times that changed how the world works. And they could not have made those decisions that way, most likely, if they hadn't had some sort of real regimen of not just being active all the time, of sitting and looking out, Winston Churchill looking out over the lawns that he did every day, the kinds of things like that that happen in an office space, and we don't even understand them. We couldn't tell each other how that works, why it works. You mentioned the water cooler, and I think that we reference that because it is like us as wildebeests coming down and spending time together, but we walk away with things we could not even define.
I agree. And I think the digital type setup does not lend itself to that because you got a screen, you're always busy. If I'm here, I'm working. And I think there's something to kicking your feet up on your desk for 5 minutes and just thinking. I don't care about what, but that's where the big ideas come from. That's where the revolutionary moments come from, is just, can I sit back and just think about this a little bit?
And
Um,
we
it's
do
even
not
better if then you can bounce that off your buddy down the hall, right?
and we don't there's a value to it. There was as different tech companies have done things like build spaces like the Google space that builds play in, that does those sorts of things. I think there are a lot of places that don't quite understand the why of that because of the American work ethic, which is if you're not literally, I'm tracking you, which you have software now that can track what you're doing. Those sorts of things don't, I think, advance us into the realm of your mind putting the stuff together that you otherwise never would.
Right. And I don't mistake me as saying, and I know you don't, but just no listener mistake me for saying that office culture is not changing. Office culture is changing. The length of time we're there, the way you interact, 100% that's changing. But
Yeah.
I think what we will revert to is the need to have a space where people can do that together.
Yeah. 100%. All right. Well, I could talk to you forever, but I'm going to get us to the last little bit. We always ask someone who comes on to make us smarter at Smarter You to give us a resource, something that has worked for you in some aspect of your life. Doesn't have to be real estate, something that you found that is really helpful to help us curate information. With the barrage we get, we feel like that's one of the great tasks. So, what is something that you've found out there that you find useful?
Sure. I love the site PitchBook. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's kind of the
No.
venture capital, private equity space where they're tracking deals. And there's a very expensive database behind it, but they send out a daily update. And to be honest with you, it's mostly technology focused, but it's about, private acquisitions, new Series A financing for startups. Most of it kind of Silicon Valley based, but number one, I'm really interested in that space, even though I'm a real estate guy. In my alternate life, I would be a venture capitalist, but I neither have the smarts nor the capital to ever do that. But I love seeing those updates because I mean I think ultimately what it's doing, you're seeing kind of the flow of capital and where investors are putting their money, and that affects real estate, right? It's these ideas of demand, technology, that we've talked about, and also it helps me take a bigger view of the overall perspective on investment capital. Sometimes I get so myopic on real estate, but I recognize real estate is just part of a myriad of investment options or a well diversified portfolio, right? And so I think it helps you get a better overall perspective. But I love PitchBook.
PitchBook, is it pitchbook.com? You know what it is?
Yeah, I think it's pitchbook.com.
Okay.
If you just Google PitchBook,
You'll find it.
PITCHBOOK, it'll be the predominant site. There's an app as well. I think that you can
Okay.
get free news as well. But once you have a user account, it sends out a daily newsletter, which I scan almost every day.
I love that. And I also want to point out what you said about how it may not be in your direct lane. But if you don't know that there are other lanes on the freeway, you're not going to drive on the freeway very well. So I think that's really important as a sort of closing moment for us is this understanding that the thing you point out as a resource is outside, but it's all connected. It's like your body. It's like not understanding that if you hurt something, one part of your body, the other part's going to suffer because that's all the way that all enterprise is connected to. Jared Harrell, thank you so much for joining us. It was a true pleasure come back again, will you?
Man, love to. I love it every time you and I connect, Steve. It needs to happen more often. But this was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed talking about these things with you, man.
Oh, what a pleasure. All right. Peace out.